Welcome to Femcasters, a podcast and community where feminine wiles and ferocious female voices collide.
Femcasters was born from the idea that we can change the world one broadcast at a time. We are here to unite and elevate the voices of silence breakers just like you, girl-wide.
Let's kick it, Corinna.
Kick it!
Anyway, we can talk about whatever you want.
Perfect. Well, we're officially recording, so.
Have you ever recorded before, Dr. Laura? I'm just curious. Is this your first?
My first ever.
No, I mean, we adore you. Obviously, I've been a super fan of yours since forever. But to have you in the studio, in this quote, air quotes studio, just to understand your history. But your voice, I think, has changed and really has evolved over the past decade, if you will. Do you want to walk us through that?
It's a long evolution. I would say it's widened and evolved more than changed, because I've almost come full circle. I started off as a relationship therapist, a love therapist, and I've always known that my purpose is to help people learn to love and be loved better, and that's never changed. And then I started doing sex therapy as part of couples therapy, relationship therapy. And I needed to get my own training during my clinical training, because the reason I ended up doing it is because there was no training for it. And I didn't understand that. So I got myself trained. And then, of course, I started seeing a lot of people who had those issues, among other ones. And then that's what I, sort of accidentally got famous for when I wrote my first book about women's sexual health, because I realized there was nothing out there about the way that the medical aspects, joined forces with the emotional ones. And so it's just sort of evolved one thing after another. And then when I got into my 40s and I started going into, experiencing one AFGE after another, as I call them, another frickin' growth experience after another.
Oh, it's frickin' now?
Well, can I say fucking on this?
You can.
I'm just like automatically PG-13 unless given permission to be otherwise. Given the topics that I tend to talk about, I just err on the side of not cursing until I'm invited to. So another fucking growth experience after another. My mother, who I was really close to, died of breast cancer. Then I got breast cancer, and it was one thing after another. And I think that sort of changed the trajectory of what I did for my own self-preservation. And it kind of set me on a more spiritual path. And then that, of course, affected my work. And I started discovering all of these quantum truths and metaphysical teachings that really added whole new layers to my work as well as my life. And so I guess that's how things have evolved over time. And then I would say for the past year, it's been evolving more to really be about the next layer for me, which is really going deep into the body and into being with our deepest, most vulnerable places and our fears and our losses and our traumas, still all in service to widening the heart to love and be loved better. But it's just kind of evolved. And I'm sure it will continue to, hopefully for another 50 years.
Well, you've written a smattering of New York Times bestsellers, and then also a recent book on quantum love that I had the pleasure of listening to you talk about when you were interviewed on Jules' other podcast, Obsessed with Humans on the Verge of Change. So I wonder if you could talk a bit about what that journey is like. A lot of our community here of femcasters are authors, aspiring authors, podcasters, aspiring podcasters. A lot of people are just getting their start,
What my journey to publishing would be, you mean, or to quantum love, or to both? Which are you asking?
I think both. I'm asking both.
Well, I guess they're related, because it really is about manifesting. I think the key for all of us, and I was, like I said, very lucky in this way that I knew my purpose really early. I don't think most of us really are that lucky, although more and more people are finding that. And it's usually through those tough times that we, it's really through our pain that we find our purpose. And for good and for bad. I think I had a lot of pain early on in life that led me in the direction to being one of those wounded healers, which most healers are. And so I think the key is if you don't, if to find what breaks your heart, as one of my favorite authors and teachers, Dr. Teradai Trent always says, your purpose is found in what breaks your heart. And I think it's really about really connecting with that purpose that feels so authentic to you. And like, you shouldn't even get paid for doing it, whatever it is. It brings you so much wholeness. And then from that place, you're driven to create and to manifest. I'm not one of those people. I have a lot of friends who are very successful and are all about like, okay, now I'm going to have a mansion on the mountains in Colorado, and it's going to have this kind of creek in front of it. And, they're really good at like creating those manifesting dreams. That's not actually my strong suit at all. But I would say that that's really the key in taking your message out there is, for me, I don't think it's necessary to be a master imaginer. You may not know exactly how you're going to take your purpose out. It may be a book, it may be a podcast, it may be a screenplay, it may be a work of art. But if you just follow the breadcrumbs of joy and you stay clear on your purpose and you get clear on how you want to feel doing your work in the world, then, and at least in my case, it's always just sort of the next thing has always unfolded. When I run into trouble is when I've been like, okay, I got to make this happen. I've got to fix, manage, and control it into being. Why is it happening over there and it's not happening here? And, if you get into that energy, I think that's what tends to keep you stuck from really expressing your genius in the world.
And you did mention that heartbreak often leads you to your purpose. And I know in the past year, I mean, your story is so powerful. Your heartbreak is unimaginable. Corinna's a mom of 2 boys. I have 4 boys. You have the 3 boys. Together, that is 9.
Yeah.
My math. But your purpose, I feel, has shifted, at least as I see how you curate your messages on social media and through everything.
I'm not that conscious. Yeah, I'm not that conscious about saying, okay, my purpose has shifted. It's just where my work in the world has always been so intimately connected to what's internally driving me. And so that always is the direction where it ends up going. And so that's what's happening now. My son was tragically killed from fentanyl poisoning almost a year ago. And so, it's interesting leading up before, like about a year before his death, that entire year, I was working on a memoir, and it was really complicated. And it was really probably, my dad had died. So I felt finally free to really write about some of this stuff. And over the course of that year before Sammy died, just by different circumstances, I met 3 different, one was a shaman, one was a medium, and one was like a psychic medium healer, and 3 totally different scenarios. And I didn't ask them about this book I was writing, although that if you'd asked me, what are you working on then, that's what I would have said. And each one of them, and it was about me, and it was about abuse, and it was about claiming your true sexual and vulnerable self. And I may still write that book one day, but what was so weird looking back is that each of those 3 people said to me specifically, don't think too much about it. Just, okay, you're going to write a book. And if you're going to write it, just write it quickly. Don't think too much about it. Don't stall too much. Just write it. And I didn't really understand why they were saying that. I thought, what are they thinking? I'm going to overthink it? Are they thinking I don't really think I'm going to? And then 2 out of the 3 also said, your future work is about your children. And I had never really thought about, I never thought about my kids being a fundamental part of my work in the world, directly or indirectly. And so after Sammy died, within, after that year of these 3 messages, and since then, as I've looked back, I realized that they knew this was coming, or something was coming on a certain level. And they were like, you better get that freaking book done because it's not even going to be on your radar after your son dies. And that's absolutely, I mean, I had an agent that I was working with and was helping me edit the proposal, and we were doing a new draft. And she hasn't even reached out to me again after the original, condolences. And I'm so sorry. Like, we both knew at that point that that book is on a back shelf for a while now. So, but now something else is evolving, and it's not about parenting at all, which is how I interpreted those messages I got. It's about the lessons that I've learned and continue to learn through the pain that is like no other, that almost no one can imagine, including myself before this, how that transmutes and alchemizes and transforms you, and how to survive that has ended up teaching me so much that, once again, is in service to loving and being loved better. So it's all, that's being in your body, feeling your feelings, being with the depths of your vulnerabilities, moving through difficult emotions so that you can experience more freedom and joy, realizing that the worst pain you feel and allow yourself to feel that much more joy you can also feel. That's now becoming part of my teachings, as well as how to connect with your loved ones on the other side.
Wow. Well, I mean, you're building an incredible community that's connected through this process too. I understand there's I believe, a Facebook group that erupted to thousands, tens of thousands of people.
Yeah. After Sammy died, it just exploded because, thankfully there's more and more attention on this issue. I had never even heard about it before Sammy was killed, but how Snapchat is so instrumental in kids accessing drugs, and getting them delivered to their house, and then they're laced with fentanyl, and then they die of fentanyl poisoning, which is what's happened. I think 100,000 people died. It's the number one killer of kids above suicide or drugs or anything else, is fentanyl poisoning right now. But this was just sort of happening at the time. And when it came out on the news, because people were, I didn't realize it was going to be such a big deal when I posted it to my little community, but then the news picked it up. And then, 10,000 parents messaged me, and I didn't know what to do because I was I just lost him. So we
knew what to do, Dr. Laura. You were on Gayle King the next day.
I didn't mean to be. Like, that's the thing. I felt so helpless in that moment that all I did, I just was like, oh my, when the police told me that there was nothing they could do to catch the guy, and there was nothing Snapchat would do, even though I had the guy's handle, they wouldn't tell him who the guy was. I flipped out. And I also flipped out thinking, oh my God, there are all these other kids that are like, I got to say something. And I was freaking out on top of freaking out. I was just having a panic attack. And my husband said, okay, just post it on social media, like tell your people, that'll make you feel better. And so I did. And then the next thing I know, that today, what's her name? Kate Snow from NBC Nightly News called me. And I literally spoke to her the day after. I said, I don't think I'm even going to get through this. I'm not putting on hair and makeup. I don't give a shit. I just don't want another kid to die. If I can save one kid, I'll suck it up and go on. And so that's what that snowball was. And then all these parents started showing up. And that's what I mean. I didn't know what to do with all these people reaching out. So I just put them together in a support group called Parents for Safer Children. And they have been, they have been amazing, the way they support each other and share with each other and understand each other. I think there's like 12,000 parents on there, and not all of them have lost, most of them probably have lost their children the way I lost Sammy, but there are tons who, have just lost their children at all different ages. And it's a really beautiful community. So that just grew out of them all reaching out to me at the same time, and me not being able to have the energy to exchange with them because I was so deep in my own grief. I put them all together, and they've been amazing.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, on a personal level, I related to this story in a way I didn't expect to. I listened to the episode. I've heard some of your other shows as well. And, I had, and I won't call it a similar situation, but one of my dear, dear friends, best friend from college, was randomly attacked and murdered by a man walking down the street. He'd decided that the next woman he saw walking alone, he was going to kill. It was broad
I'm
daylight,
so
right?
sorry. Yeah.
So just a really awful thing. And I don't want to get into too much of it, but the thing that does connect is that the reason he was even on the street in the first place was basically an administrative error on the part of the prison system, because new legislation had been put through that said that if you hadn't had a parole hearing in 6 months, no matter what the crime had been, that you would be
Yeah.
released onto the streets. And so because they had not given him a parole hearing, he was released onto the streets because it was fixing an administrative error. He was in jail for a violent felony and should have remained in jail for another several years. And so we had to work to lobby Congress, and we're successful in getting that loophole closed.
Well, that's good.
But
That's a big accomplishment because we have not had the same luck because we're up against Snapchat and the social media companies, but we are pushing for legislation that will at least require that any social media company that has children on its platform must allow parent monitoring software, because Facebook and Instagram, or Facebook especially does, Instagrams is so, but Snapchat does not allow it because they don't want anyone else having access to their data, including a third-party monitoring system, because that's where they make their money. That's where the kids are, and they don't allow us to use that. And they keep saying they're going to create their own, but their own is going to suck, first of all. And second of all, until then, we got to do something while these kids are dying. So they've been horrible, but we are pushing for that legislation, and hopefully it will get through.
wow.
Yeah.
Well, there's power in community, and the more people that know about that story, the more likely it is that something will change, because it takes a huge effort to get anything to move through Congress, and it's a lot more than one person's power. So through your tragedy in some way, I hope that that is the end result. And if there's anything I can personally do to support that journey, I'm here in California, and
thank you.
I will support it.
Well, we just wrote a letter to the president that's getting a lot of attention right now. And we have Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the representative from Florida, and some other, hoping to get bipartisan support. And they have named it, this wasn't my idea, but they have named it Sammy's Law, which is very sweet.
Wow.
And it is being written up now. I think the key is really going to be when it goes, when it's going to be presented, we all have to call our lawmakers, because, these things just fall through the cracks unless each lawmaker has, at least 15 constituents call them that day about, then the message will get through their assistant to pay attention to this. But otherwise, they're just going to be we're working against such strong lobbyists in the social media company world that, we're just like a teeny tiny drip in the ocean. But I hopefully it'll change, but that's not what I'm basing my future happiness on.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be happy, you can't rely on Congress. So I'll say, though, is it feels like what we're talking about here is the power of using your voice and acknowledging its impact on communities to actually increase your impact as time goes forward. As long as you're really on that track, that feels like it's yours. And so, I mean, I wonder if, is this something that you talk about on your own podcast, or do you stay really focused on the relationships?
No, I talk about everything and whatever I'm interested in. I've kind of gotten to the point in my life where I can't do anything that I'm not super interested in. So
I like that time of life.
I hear that.
So I have no interest in investing time and energy in something that doesn't light me up. So I just follow what really lights me up. And I trust that my tribe, who's interested in the same thing, is going to follow along. I've never been good at doing it backwards. Who is my tribe and what do they want? I try to, I just focus more on what's lighting me up. So I have metaphysical teachers on there. I have, relationship therapists on there. Sometimes I'll just spend a show answering calls and questions about sex and love. Sometimes I'll interview someone. I've had, it just varies, but it's what I'm really like, who piques my curiosity, or who I think my audience would really enjoy, or has something really valuable to teach us about how to love and be loved better.
Your topics span the gamut. If you even look at your link tree, you have how to do Kegels better, your interview with Nick Cannon,
Yeah.
change.org. I mean, so it is what lights you up and it is
Yeah.
what has guided your path, but it has guided your path so successfully. Are there tips in terms of, you know, not holding on to things so tightly?
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends on what you deem success, right? Like by a lot of standards, I don't even know. Like if you look at I don't know how many Instagram followers I have, but it's certainly not what a lot of quote unquote successful influencers have because I don't buy followers because I want them to be real and I want to have that exchange with them. So, but at the same time, anyone who does social media marketing or whatever would tell me, oh, you have to be really predictable about what you're doing and your too many things, you know, your grief, your sex, you're like, what are you? Who are you? I'm like, I am that. I am grief and sex.
Grief and
And,
sex. That's
and
going to be the name
everything
of
in
this.
between. Yeah. I mean, that's just who I am. And it's not an identity crisis. It's just, is that mine or yours? The little
That's my
dog.
dog, sorry.
Okay, I thought it was mine. It's not an identity crisis. It's just to me, it's all related because it's everything that I'm teaching and doing myself is all in service to showing up with more wholeness and authenticity and higher vibration and manifesting energy in your life, in your love life, in your work life. It's all about healing and claiming your power, and that's everything in calling and maintaining amazing love in your life. It all starts with the kind of love you can give yourself.
So, is there a particular topic you don't touch on your show?
Politics. I don't like politics.
I don't like talking about politics on mine either, but sometimes a guest brings it in, and I always
Yeah.
have to feel like I have to make that difficult choice about whether or not to edit it out.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I try not to edit anything out, but I also think that there's people are being recycled and refed their same regurgitated perspectives on all sides. And everybody is absolutely convinced of their righteous truth. And I'm sitting in my cheap seats looking around at all of them and just not being willing to be in the division.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's really what this is doing. It's harming us so deeply on so many levels, politically, emotionally, socially, collectively, energetically, to be in this kind of division. And there's so many people committed to the division that I just have zero interest in adding to it.
Yeah.
I will, if I feel strongly about something, I will talk about it, whether it's, a right for a woman to control what happens to her body, to, LGBT community having the right to, claim their gender, whatever it is, and their right to marry. I've always been really advocate throughout my career. I've really pushed for that. But to me, that's not a political agenda. That's a human agenda more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I like to call that's the humanitarian side of things. And if you try to make the humanitarian side of a belief system into a politicized belief system, I feel like that's disserving everybody because you're essentially saying, oh, well, this side, this entire half of the population doesn't care if
or they're all racist, or they're all idiots, or they're all yogis, or it's just perpetuating stereotypes,
right,
and division, and we're being fed in our little social media worlds and online media that we watch and news that we consume. It's all geared toward your perspective, so your perspective is never challenged, and that to me is dangerous.
Yeah. Well, that's how social media is.
Mm-hmm.
It's impacting us negatively. And
I just want to say one thing before you go on, because I was just thinking about this morning when all of these things were showing up in my feed that I'd recently been searching. And I thought, you know what? Social media is really like manifesting through your energetic frequency, because I always say where attention goes, energy flows. And so if you want to know where you've been putting your emotional and intellectual energy, pay attention to what's showing up on your feed, because that's a really good indication of what you're calling into your life.
Interesting challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's actually something I use Instagram for. This is something that Dr. God, he's not a doctor. Mo Gaudat, he wrote the book Scary Smart, which is all about artificial intelligence. But the basics of it are focused on what our role is in that, because there's nothing stopping AI at this point.
Yeah.
AI is smarter than humanity in 5 years or less. Like, it's happening, right?
The Terminator.
So he's like, it's all about what we teach it. And one of the things he purported is that if you go to your Instagram feed, for example, and just search for things that are on point with what your desired feed would look like for a period of a few days or months, or, it just doesn't have to be that long, that suddenly every time you go to that discovery tab, you're going to find things that resonate with that, as opposed to the girl staring in the mirror, like skinny versus fat or whatever.
Yes.
And if you,
Or-
because it learns what you pause on, and it learns.
And it's so powerful energetically. Like, I've been fantasizing seriously, and I don't know how it's going to happen, but I'm manifesting it, of having a little teeny hobby farm with a few little pigs and some horses and some goats and my vegetables, and just like not too far from an airport, but like far enough to feel like you're in the country. And so I started looking around, and I am in ecstasy. And this is what made me think of it this morning, is my entire feed is filled with gorgeous tiny houses on farmland, and all of these farms and farm life, and pigs and chickens, and the best chicken coop ads, and all this stuff that's just feeding my manifestation energy. So that's a way we can use social media to drive our desires rather than make us feel bad about ourselves or divide ourselves.
Right. I actually found it surprising, because I don't search for things like the makeup tutorials and things like that. Yet every time I go into my Instagram discovery tab, that seems to be a lot of what's there.
You buy it. They know you buy it because they do.
It's serious. The other day, just even Alexa in the room scares me, because and stuff pops up on my social media.
Yeah. Oh my God. She totally listens and puts it up there. And you want to hear a hilarious conversation? I still tease him about it. But my husband, we were talking not about this manifesting thing, but my girlfriend and I were laughing that the only thing at that point that was coming up on our feeds were kittens and babies, in the explore page. That's what I'm talking about. Like, it's all kittens and babies. And we said, yeah, it's what you're searching for. And my husband says, nah, because the only thing that's coming up on mine is porn and cars. And I was like, honey, you just outed yourself. But I do think they do say gender, age, whatever. So you are going to get it if you're in that demo that is likely to want a car or buy makeup. But it's definitely exacerbated by where you're putting your attention. Where attention goes, energy flows, including social media energy.
Sorry about that. I was actually just trying to verify something on my phone about how the Instagram feed is looking. And started auto-playing like some weird thing.
How does Sam handle a woman in the spotlight and so open, and just mentioning that he's...
No, he would die if he knew I mentioned that. I hope he doesn't hear this. That's luckily he doesn't, he doesn't really read a lot about what I write, or the only time he notices is if I were to ever talk about him on social media. He does follow my social media, but otherwise he's got his own focus. But our only agreement, which was very early on, was that I'm not allowed to talk about our sex life. So I try not to talk about him. I don't have much to say about him other than examples of ways we work together well, or positive things about him. So it's not like I would be having a bitch. I don't think he worries about that. He's just, ironically, or not so, given that we tend to choose people who have qualities we aspire to or want to heal in ourselves, he is extremely private. I mean, my nickname for him is also Mr. Proper, which is hilarious because like I'll belch and fart with my,
Yeah.
15-year-old kid and have, contests, and he's like mortified. But so he's very proper in many ways, not in the most important ways, but in terms of like social niceties. And I am completely unfiltered. And he's used to me, when I was doing a lot of speaking and he was with me, the only thing he had to really get used to is people by proxy would think he was an expert. And so while they were in line or wanting to speak to me after a talk, they would find him knowing he was my partner and start telling them about, their orgasmic disorder or chronic
Oh my God, the
UTIs
look on
or
his
whatever else.
face.
It was pretty hilarious. I love making him uncomfortable, in those ways. It's very entertaining. It's something, I'm not sure what that says about my personality, but I get a really big kick I think it comes from my father. I get a really big kick out of like people being a little uncomfortable. I don't know what that says about me, but it's
We
true.
all like to do that as wives, though, I think. We all do that no matter if we try or not. So we really appreciate your wisdom. I guess like my one question as a femcaster is, when you were in your early days of broadcasting
Mm-hmm.
and you got brought into the fold of the Oprah Winfrey just dynasty, what was
Mm-hmm.
that like, and how was that materialized? Do you have a show on the OWN network? You know,
Yeah. That was just it was a really cool time in my life. I had already been living in Chicago for 7 years. And, what I eventually learned with the Oprah show and the Oprah world is that you don't pitch them. Like they just decide and find you when, that's it. I can't even think about how many times I had pitched them. I had gone on the show when I wrote my first book in 2000 about women's sexual dysfunction. And then she didn't touch sex with a 10-foot pole, no pun intended, for, another 7 years. But then I was doing a once a week, and this is once again, follow your breadcrumbs of joy, do what you would do for free anyway, and success will follow. So I was going on a local radio show in Chicago every Friday for an hour with these shock jocks, taking calls about love, sex, and relationships. And I had done that for the whole year. Eddie and Jobo show. It's not on anymore.
Aren't those
And
fun though? I mean, I've been
yeah,
on.
on
96.
B96. And
I
it
live
was
in Chicago, so
okay. So,
yeah.
and I loved it. And I just did it. I did it for free. I did it for fun. It wasn't like I was expecting anything out of it. And then in 2007, when Oprah was finally ready to do a show about women's sexuality, the producer who was doing that show had listened to my segment every Friday with Eddie and Jobo on her way of taking her kids to school. So as soon as Oprah said, I want to do about women's sex, she's like, oh my God, I know the perfect person. And she's right here in Chicago. And so that's how I went on the Oprah show. I actually met my husband the first time I had gone on 7 years prior. I knew him as a young girl, but we met again as adults in that studio when I did the show for the first time. And then when I did it 7 years later, he was in the audience as my husband now, which was kind of a cool full circle. But then I went for that one show. And luckily I had brought 2 outfits because I wasn't sure what I was going to wear. And we were having such a great conversation. She just said, do you have a change of clothes? And I said, yes. And she said, go change. We're going to keep going, make a second hour. And then on the way home, they called me and they said, Oprah's starting a network. We want to develop a show with you. So that was a band. It was just super easy. Like I would have loved that for 7 years prior, but once I was just doing what I loved, it all just fell into place.
Well, and you're speaking to the power of that early effort that wasn't compensated. It was you were doing it because it was something you were interested in and it got noticed. And so that's something I like to remind people too. Like even if you're out there podcasting right now and it may not be making you money right now, you don't know what it's going to lead to down the road because your voice is getting preserved and out there, and who knows whose hands and whose ear holes that is ending up in.
Almost everything I've done and achieved in my life has started with me doing it for free, either through an internship so that I could get in the door somewhere, or, even the podcast I'm doing now, I'm not making much money at all from it, but I just love doing it. And so I'm doing it. And it's been, gaining momentum and doing great. So I think, you still obviously have to pay the bills. But when it comes to those passion projects, yes, think about ways that you can monetize them, but also widen your view and welcome in. The universe is always going to come up with something a million times better than you could ever imagine. So if you just, it always, I don't know how else to say it except follow the breadcrumbs of joy when an opportunity is presented to you. And this I started doing when I was a really young adult. I would say to myself, okay, I don't know how this is going to make money, but I know I have a full body yes to it. And if I have a full body yes to it, it's eventually going to turn into money, because that's all money is energy and vibration. And it's always worked out that way, but it often means but my motivation never comes from money to start something or to do something.
Well, I love that perspective of it being a full body experience. It's not
Yeah,
just
for
like,
sure.
hey, your head
Full
saying
body,
yes.
Right.
Full
Because
body.
if it's a yes that's coming from ego, or, oh yeah, because I've been offered amazing opportunities that my head really wants to say yes to, but there's something off, or it's really not in integrity with what I really, really believe, or where I really want to be putting my energy, but it would bring in a lot of money or bring in a lot of fame or whatever. And I've said no, because those things never work out. And it's a waste of energy. And like I said, I just don't have the energy to do things that I don't have a full body yes to anymore.
I think that's going to become my new mantra. Is this
Full
a
body,
full body
yes.
yes?
Yeah,
Mine's
because
gonna
you
be
will have a head
following.
yes often. That's why you have to be in your body. And that's what I've learned this year more than everything in life works. We're scared shitless to be in our bodies because it can be painful in there. But the more you're in the body, the better life gets, seriously, on all fronts, because you're attuned to your gut. You're attuned to really what you want. You're taking care of yourself. You're tapping into your spiritual power. All of that starts with being in your body and feeling what you're feeling and honoring what you're feeling, which is what a gut reaction really is. If you're not in your body, you ain't going to feel your gut, or you're going to ignore it if you do.
Full body, yes. We're glad you got the full body, yes, when we asked you to be on Femcasters.
Yeah.
And
And it took a while, right? I didn't have a full body yes for a while,
okay.
right? And then I eventually said, okay, let's do it.
Of the family, those extracurricular noises, but follow the breadcrumbs of joy. And I will never forget that, because that's what I was doing. That's what I do, but I didn't know the language to wrap around that, following the breadcrumbs of joy.
Yeah. It's okay.
They're
It's okay.
so okay. There are some breadcrumbs of joy out there in the
Now,
hallway,
I
but
think your breadcrumbs of joy are out in the yard away from those
yeah, and a she
noisemakers right
shed.
now.
I need to be in a she
You
shed
do.
in the backyard.
I can send you one of my tiny house links.
Feed, by the way, too. I
Yeah.
haven't paid attention to it because I don't put that much attention to social
Yeah.
media, but now I'm gonna be like using my
You will
quantum
shop more
energy.
though. That's the problem, because
Oh, yeah.
I get proposed so many cool things, candles and crystals and things that I love. I'm constantly being offered. So that is a little bit of a problem, but otherwise it's really fun.
And when you're shopping, do you have to have a full body yes to buy things? Or you're just
Yes,
like
you know what? I put it in my cart and then I don't buy it. And then I come back to it the next day and I see if I have a full body yes. And then I always end up getting rid of half of it. But then I keep a few things. So yeah, I use it in that too.
Love that. And you had a full body yes when you said yes to marrying your husband and like
Yeah,
everything you do. And it is
I
tapping
did.
into yourself, that intuitive side, understanding who you are and being self-aware and just going for it and not saying no, not
Yeah.
saying no.
And not convincing, you could think through the consequences so easily and convince yourself into doing something or into not trying something. And you don't freaking know. I mean, none of us know what the hell's going to happen in 5 minutes, much less 6 months from now or a year from now. So we just have to be here and be in our yes and be in our purpose, and the rest will follow.
I love that. And I don't know a better way to wrap up this than saying thank you, and the rest will follow. And thank you, Dr. Laura. To learn more about Dr. Laura, we will put all her information in the show notes. Check out the show notes. And Corinna, are you going to ask Dr. Laura to do the deed.
We do.
She's like, what?
When you say do the deed, especially when we're
Do the
talking to
deed?
somebody who's a
I
relationship
know.
and sex therapist, like
So this
it's
will be
not.
nothing for you.
So we like to ask all of our guests to say something silly as we wrap up, which is just kick it.
Kick it.
Kick it, Jules.
Kick it. Let's kick it. All right. When we have the outro music, it sounds cool.
It makes a lot more
Kick
sense.
it. Kick it. Kick it.
You could say it really sexy, Dr. Laura.
Kick it.
I love it. Thank you for listening to another episode of Femcasters. We hope you were inspired. We hope you were motivated. We hope you think a little bit differently about how your voice, your very own voice, can change the universe. So tap on those 5 stars, share the love, share this episode with another Femcaster that you think could use this message today.
And head over to femcasters.com for all the goods we covered today, including tools to elevate your voice. You can join our exclusive community and celebrate the Femcaster in you. Together, we can elevate the power and the voice of women girl-wide. Let's do this.